The first thing we heard was my dead wife's voice. "Glenn, please don't let them send me back there." It came through a speaker in a law office conference room, thin and frightened beneath the hiss of a recorded telephone line. My daughter Elise sat beside me with her arms folded. Across the table, two attorneys for Hawthorne Ridge Nursing and Rehabilitation watched our faces instead of the laptop between them. Then Nurse Tanya Webb spoke. "Mr. Foster, because the fall wasn't witnessed and Diane can't be certain whether she hit her head, my recommendation is that we call an ambulance and have her evaluated tonight. I can make that call now." There was a pause. 7 seconds, according to the timer on the screen. In those 7 seconds, I could hear Diane breathing. I could hear a medication cart rattling somewhere behind the nurse. I could hear myself making the decision I had spent 4 months pretending I had never been offered. Then my own voice said, "Don't call an ambulance." Elise turned toward me so slowly that I wished she had shouted. The recording continued. Tanya asked me twice whether I understood the risk. I said Diane had been alert, that she was speaking clearly, and that hospitals terrified her. I said I was her health care representative. I said I was not authorizing another transfer unless her condition changed. Only then came the sentence that my daughter had already played on local television. "All right, Mr. Foster, we'll keep her comfortable and check her again in the morning." The defense attorney stopped the audio. 43 seconds, he said. "That is the portion removed from the file provided to Channel 6 and attached to your original complaint." Elise looked at the waveform on the laptop. The section I had cut out was highlighted in red. "You told me that was the whole call," she said. I had spent 31 years answering emergencies for people who could not afford a lie. At 72, in a quiet room outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I learned how long 43 seconds could be. My name is Glenn Foster. I worked as a 911 dispatcher for Cumberland County until I retired. For most of my adult life, my job was to separate panic from fact. People rarely called us on a good day. They called while smoke filled a hallway, while a child stopped breathing, while a stranger pounded on a door. A dispatcher cannot climb through the phone and fix any of it. All we have are questions, timing, and a record of what was said. Every new trainee heard the same rule from me: never change a fact because the cleaner version makes more sense. Then my wife fell in a nursing home, and I did exactly that. Diane and I had been married 48 years. She taught 5th grade. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, and every storm that knocked trees across the county. We built our marriage around handoffs. I packed her lunch before I left for the evening shift. She kept dinner warm when I came home after midnight. Whoever was less tired made the coffee. Our daughter Elise grew up believing that one of us always knew what to do. That belief lasted until Diane's health began to fail. She developed Parkinson's disease at 65. At first, it was a tremor in her left hand and a hesitation before the first step. By 69, she needed help bathing and could not safely get out of bed alone at night. Her mind remained mostly clear, though fatigue sometimes made her confused. The hospital was what frightened her most. 2 years before she died, pneumonia put her in intensive care for 11 days. The infection caused delirium. She became convinced the staff had locked her in a basement. She pulled out an IV, struck a respiratory therapist, and begged me to take her home every time I visited. She remembered almost none of it afterward, but the fear stayed. "If I get sick again," she told me, "don't let them turn me into that person." We completed an advance directive. It said no prolonged ventilation if recovery was unlikely. It named me as her health care representative. It did not say, "Never send her to a hospital." That difference became important later. At the time, I heard only what my wife needed from me. "I won't let them keep doing things to you just because they're afraid to stop," I promised. Hawthorne Ridge was supposed to be temporary. Diane went there after a fractured ankle because our house had narrow stairs and I could no longer lift her. The plan was 6 weeks of rehabilitation, then home with a hospital bed in the den. The place looked respectable. There were flower boxes under the windows, a piano in the lobby, and framed inspection certificates near the administrator's office. Elise toured 3 facilities and chose that one because its fall prevention program sounded thorough. For the first month, Diane improved. She could walk 60 feet with a rolling walker and a therapist beside her. Tanya, the night nurse, called me when medications changed. She had a calm voice and did not talk to Diane as if Parkinson's had made her a child. The fall happened on a Thursday night in March. At 10:08 p.m., a nursing assistant found Diane sitting on the bathroom floor beside her walker. No one saw her fall. Diane said her foot caught on the threshold. She complained about her right shoulder but had no visible bleeding. She could state her name, the date, and where she was. When Tanya asked whether she had hit her head, Diane said, "I don't think so." That answer should have triggered more caution, not less. At 10:26, my home phone rang. Calls from Hawthorne Ridge began with an automated message saying the line might be recorded for care documentation. After Diane entered the facility, I had also enabled call archiving on our internet phone because medication names and appointment times were becoming difficult to track. Tanya knew. We had discussed it during an earlier call. She described the fall and put Diane on speaker. Diane sounded tired but coherent. "I just sat down hard," she said. "They're making a production out of it." Tanya said the facility doctor was not in the building. Because the fall was unwitnessed and Diane could not rule out hitting her head, Tanya recommended an emergency evaluation. Diane began to cry. "No hospital," she said. "Glenn, you promised." I asked whether her pupils were equal. Tanya said yes. I asked whether Diane had vomited, lost consciousness, or shown weakness on one side. Tanya said no. Those were dispatcher questions, the kind that made me feel as if I still had control. They were not a neurological examination. Tanya repeated that an ambulance was the safest choice. I looked at the framed photograph on my desk from Diane's last hospital stay. Her eyes in that picture were open but empty. I remembered her gripping my wrist and begging me to get her out, so I said the words that I later removed: "Don't call an ambulance. Before you decide that refusing the ambulance made everything that followed my fault, stay with me." The choice I made was real, and it mattered, but it did not erase what Hawthorne Ridge was required to do after I made it. Tanya said they would keep Diane comfortable and check her again in the morning. I understood that to mean the doctor would evaluate her in the morning. I also assumed the staff would monitor her through the night. I knew better than to assume. Hawthorne Ridge had a written post-fall protocol. For an unwitnessed fall with possible head impact, staff were required to begin neurological observations immediately and continue them at scheduled intervals. The checks included pupil response, level of consciousness, speech, grip strength, vital signs, and new pain. Diane's care plan incorporated that protocol because she was at high risk for falls. No neurological observation sheet was started. Tanya entered a note at 10:41 saying the family had declined hospital transfer and that the resident would be monitored. Then a different resident pulled out a feeding tube. An aide called off sick. At 11, Tanya began a medication round that should have had two nurses covering it. At midnight, a nursing assistant looked through Diane's doorway and recorded that she appeared asleep. At 2, another aide initialed a routine rounding sheet without entering the room. The hallway camera later showed her passing the door. At 4, no one documented seeing Diane at all. The phrase "appeared asleep" covered 6 hours in which a slow bleed was building pressure inside my wife's skull. At 6:17 the next morning, an aide could not wake her. This time, Hawthorne Ridge called 911 before calling me. I knew from the administrator's voice that the situation was bad. I still drove to the hospital as if arriving quickly could change the order of events. The emergency physician showed me the scan. A crescent of blood pressed against the left side of Diane's brain. She had an acute subdural hematoma, probably caused by the fall. Surgery might relieve the pressure, he said, but her overall condition made recovery uncertain. Elise reached the hospital 40 minutes later. She found me in a consultation room holding Diane's advance directive. "What happened?" she asked. I told her Diane had fallen and the nursing home had waited until morning to send her out. That sentence was true. It was also designed to hide the most important thing I had done. Elise asked whether anyone had called me during the night. "The nurse called after the fall," I said. "And?" "She said they'd watch her." I did not mention the ambulance. Diane never regained meaningful consciousness. After 2 days, the neurosurgeon said that even with surgery, she was unlikely to return to the life she had known. Elise and I agreed to remove the breathing tube. Diane died 22 minutes later while I held the same hand that had once gripped mine in terror. Grief does not arrive alone. It brings clerks, forms, invoices, passwords, and questions that seem cruel because the answers still matter. Elise wanted every record from Hawthorne Ridge. She requested the fall report, staffing schedule, medication administration log, hallway footage, and Diane's chart. I was proud of her thoroughness until she asked whether my telephone system had saved Tanya's call. It had. For 3 nights I listened to it alone in my study. The full recording was 2 minutes and 12 seconds. The part that condemned the nursing home came at the end. We'll keep her comfortable and check her again in the morning. The part that condemned me came directly before it. I told myself the facility's failure was larger. I had declined a hospital transfer because Diane was lucid enough to express a fear she had carried for years. Hawthorne Ridge had accepted responsibility for monitoring her and then failed to perform the checks in its own policy. Both statements were true, but truth is not a bucket where one fact displaces another. I opened the audio file in a program I had used to clean static from old dispatch recordings. I highlighted 43 seconds, beginning with Tanya's ambulance recommendation and ending after my refusal. Then I deleted them. I smoothed the remaining gap with half a second of room tone. I exported a new file under the same name and erased the original from the call archive folder. My hands did not shake. That frightened me later. I had taught people how to recognize altered audio, abrupt changes in background noise, missing breaths, compression artifacts, a timestamp that no longer matched the duration. I knew exactly enough to make the edit sound natural to an ordinary listener and exactly enough to understand it would not survive forensic review. I was not planning for court. I was planning for my daughter. When I gave Elise the file, she listened to the last 20 seconds 3 times. They knew she'd fallen, she said. They knew she might have hit her head, and they decided to wait until morning. I looked at the floor and let her believe it. Our first attorney was Rachel Sloan, a medical negligence lawyer in Harrisburg. Rachel listened to the audio, read the chart, and said the missing neurological checks were the strongest part of the case. The recording sounds terrible, she told us, but we need the internal review before we make claims about what the nurse offered or understood. Elise did not want to wait. Hawthorne Ridge had sent a condolence letter and refunded 3 days of room charges. Its insurer asked for more time. To Elise, every cautious sentence sounded like preparation for a cover-up. She was grieving too, though hers came out as motion. She built timelines, called former employees, and calculated what the facility had charged for overnight nursing during Diane's 6 weeks there. She found 2 families who said call lights sometimes went unanswered. Then she contacted Channel 6. Maya Chen, an investigative reporter, had aired stories about unsafe care facilities. Elise sent her the audio before telling Rachel or me. She also sent photographs of Diane before and after the fall. When she called to say Maya wanted an interview, I asked her to wait for the state investigation. They'll drag this out for a year, Elise said. Public pressure is the only thing they understand. Once it airs, we can't control what people do with it. Why would we want to control the truth? I could have stopped her with one sentence. I said nothing. Elise's motives were not purely noble. She wanted accountability, but she also wanted leverage. Rachel had warned us that Pennsylvania law and Diane's condition made damages difficult to predict. Elise believed public outrage would force the insurer into a large settlement before the weaknesses of the case were fully examined. She talked about compensation as if it could become proof that her mother's suffering mattered. They made millions last year, she told me. If the number doesn't hurt, nothing changes. I understood the anger. I also saw how easily justice and punishment had begun using the same language. The Channel 6 story aired 11 days after Diane's funeral. Maya stood outside Hawthorne Ridge beneath a gray sky. The building's flower boxes were empty. She described an unwitnessed fall, a delayed transfer, and missing neurological checks. Then the screen changed to a photograph of Diane smiling at Elise's wedding. The edited call began. Tanya's voice said, "All right, Mr. Foster, we'll keep her comfortable and check her again in the morning." Maya called it the last recorded medical decision before Diane Foster was found unresponsive. Elise sat beneath studio lights and said, They treated my mother like she could be put on a shelf until the next shift. I watched from our living room. My interview had been recorded separately because I refused to go into the studio. They used 6 seconds of me saying she trusted them to watch her. Within an hour, the station's social media post had thousands of comments. People called Hawthorne Ridge murderers. Someone published Tanya's home address. Her photograph, taken from the facility website, appeared beside words like killer and liar. The next morning, Hawthorne Ridge suspended her pending investigation. I knew Tanya had offered the ambulance. I knew she had made the recommendation more than once. I still did not speak. The facility's public statement said the broadcast recording omitted relevant context. Elise held it up as proof they intended to blame our family. Rachel was furious that she had gone to the press. Media attention does not preserve evidence, she said. It makes every witness hire counsel. Then she turned to me. Glenn, is there anything before the sentence in that file? There are lies told with words and lies told with posture. I kept my face still and answered, not in the recording I have. Rachel stared at me long enough to make clear that she had heard the difference. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It alleged that Hawthorne Ridge failed to assess Diane properly after an unwitnessed fall, failed to perform required neurological checks, failed to notify a physician promptly, and delayed emergency treatment. One paragraph also said staff had decided against hospital transfer without giving the family a meaningful choice. That paragraph existed because of me. Hawthorne Ridge denied the allegations. Its attorneys demanded the original audio file and the devices used to create, store, or edit it. Rachel told us not to delete or alter anything. I had already deleted the original, but remnants of a file do not disappear merely because an icon leaves a folder. The defense hired an audio forensics specialist. She found that the file Elise sent Channel 6 had been exported by editing software 3 days after Diane died. Its internal duration did not match the call log entry. On my computer, a temporary project folder still contained waveform preview data. In unallocated space on the drive, she recovered fragments of the original audio. The nursing home's telephone vendor supplied a low-quality backup from its quality assurance cache. The two sources overlapped. Together, they restored 43 seconds. Rachel received the report on a Monday morning. By noon, we were in her conference room. She did not raise her voice. "Tell me before they do," she said. So I did. I told her about Diane's promise. I told her about the ambulance offer. I told her I had made the edit because I believed the nursing home's failure would disappear behind my refusal. "You altered evidence," Rachel said. "I altered a copy. You deleted the original and attached the copy to a legal claim. Do not use grammar to make that smaller." Elise left the room. I found her beside the elevators, pressing the call button again, though it was already lit. "You let me go on television," she said. "I tried to tell you not to. You told me to wait. You didn't tell me why. I was afraid they'd say I killed her. So you let them say the nurse did." The elevator arrived. Elise did not get in. "Did Mom know what she was refusing?" she asked. "She knew she was afraid." "That isn't what I asked." I had no answer that did not sound like an excuse. The formal meeting with Hawthorne Ridge's lawyers took place 2 days later. That was where they played the recovered audio and showed Elise the 43 seconds in red. Tanya attended by video with her own attorney. She looked exhausted. When my voice said, "Don't call an ambulance," she closed her eyes. The defense attorney stopped the recording and said the case should be dismissed. Rachel answered before I could. "The recovered portion changes the transfer allegation," she said. "It does not create neurological checks that never happened." She placed Hawthorne Ridge's policy on the table. The required observation boxes were blank. No nurse had documented pupil response, grip strength, orientation, or vital signs after 10:41. The hallway footage contradicted the routine rounding sheet. The overnight staffing level fell below Diane's care plan. The room became quiet for a different reason. The defense had proof of my deception. We had proof of their neglect. Neither fact canceled the other. Hawthorne Ridge's administrator tried to say that my refusal limited what the staff could do. Rachel pointed to Tanya's note: "Family declined, ER transfer, continue post-fall monitoring." Your own nurse understood the difference, she said. Tanya finally spoke. I should have opened the neuro sheet myself. I thought the charge nurse had done it. Then I got pulled into another room. I never checked. It was not a complete defense. It was not murder either. I looked at her image on the screen and said the sentence I should have said before the broadcast. You offered to call an ambulance. Yes, she said. And I told you not to. Yes. Elise pushed her chair back and left the room again. For the next week, she did not answer my calls. Channel 6 learned about the restored recording from Hawthorne Ridge's court filing. Maya Chen called Elise first, then me. The station planned a correction whether we participated or not. Rachel advised me to make no public statement until she assessed the legal consequences. I understood. A new interview could damage the case, expose me to sanctions, and give the facility a second chance to hide its own failure behind mine. But silence had already done enough work for me. I called Maya back and agreed to sit down on camera on one condition. She had to play the full sequence and explain the missing checks in the same report. She agreed. Elise did not. You're doing this because you want to feel honest again, she said when she finally came to my house. That doesn't mean going on television helps Mom's case. The first story heard a nurse with an incomplete recording. The nurse still didn't monitor her. Then the truth can survive 43 seconds. Elise paced to the window. She admitted she had gone to Maya before the investigation because she wanted Hawthorne Ridge frightened. She had expected a settlement large enough to punish the company and perhaps pay off my mortgage so I would never need institutional care myself. I thought if enough people were angry they couldn't bury her, she said. You didn't know I edited it. No, but I knew I was using it before anyone had answered our questions. That was Elise's part, and she chose to name it without letting me hand her mine. The second interview was recorded in the same studio where she had accused Hawthorne Ridge. This time I sat under the lights. Maya asked whether I had altered the call. Yes, I said. I removed 43 seconds. She asked what those seconds contained. The nurse recommended an ambulance. My wife asked me not to send her, and I said, don't call an ambulance. Why did you delete that? Because I was ashamed of my decision and because I was afraid the nursing home would use it to avoid responsibility for what happened afterward. I let my daughter and the public believe the nurse had simply chosen to wait. That was false. Elise did not know I changed the recording. Maya asked whether I blamed myself for Diane's death. I had rehearsed several careful answers. None survived the question. I am responsible for refusing the ambulance, I said. I will never know whether treatment that night would have saved her. Hawthorne Ridge is responsible for failing to monitor her after it accepted my refusal. If they had done the required checks, they might have seen her condition change hours earlier. Both things can be true, even if neither side likes sharing the sentence. The station played the full call. It showed Tanya's ambulance offer, my refusal, her promise to monitor, and the empty observation record. It also reported that Elise had supplied the original clip before the state review was complete. Online, people changed sides with the speed of a weather vane. Some called me a murderer. Some called Elise a gold digger. Some decided the nursing home had done nothing wrong because I refused transport. Others said my lie did not matter because the staff had neglected Diane afterward. All of them wanted one villain. We had given them 3 flawed people and an institution. What would you have done in Elise's place after hearing the restored call, abandoned the case because your father lied, or kept fighting over the care the records proved was never given? Elise kept fighting, but she changed what she was willing to claim. Rachel amended the complaint. She removed the allegation that Hawthorne Ridge denied us a meaningful choice about hospital transfer. She disclosed the altered audio, accepted a forensic protocol for the remaining evidence, and narrowed the case to post-fall assessment, neurological monitoring, staffing, and record accuracy. The judge ordered me to pay part of the nursing home's forensic costs. He also allowed the monitoring claims to proceed because they relied on records independent of my edited file. Tanya's suspension ended. She did not return to Hawthorne Ridge. Through her attorney, she asked Channel 6 to state clearly that she had recommended emergency transfer. The station did. I wrote her a letter. I did not ask forgiveness. I described exactly what I had removed and acknowledged that my silence exposed her to public hatred. 2 months later, she sent back one line: "Tell the whole truth sooner, next time." There was no signature. The state investigation took 7 months. Investigators concluded that Hawthorne Ridge failed to follow Diane's post-fall care plan, failed to complete required neurological observations, used inaccurate rounding documentation, and did not have adequate overnight coverage for the needs of the unit. They also noted that the nurse offered hospital transfer and the family representative declined. The final report did not choose which fact mattered more. It listed them in chronological order. That was more honest than anything I had done. The lawsuit ended in a confidential settlement. It was not the enormous punishment Elise had once imagined, and the agreement did not say the facility caused Diane's death. It covered the final medical expenses, legal fees, and a payment to Diane's estate. More important to Elise, the state required a corrective action plan that could be inspected. Hawthorne Ridge changed its procedures after every unwitnessed fall. A refusal of hospital transfer now triggers an immediate supervisor review, a physician notification, and an electronic neurological observation schedule that escalates missed checks. One employee must state the refusal, another must confirm the monitoring plan. Routine doorway rounds cannot be substituted for an actual assessment. The company also rewrote its family call script. Staff now say plainly, declining an ambulance does not end our duty to monitor. Elise and I took longer to change. For months, she would not let me summarize anything important. If an insurer called, she wanted the written notice. If a doctor changed a medication, she asked to see the visit note. I bristled at first, then I remembered how confidently I had handed her a lie with a file name. Trust did not return because I admitted what I had done on television. Public confession can be another form of performance if the private habits stay the same. I gave Elise access to Diane's complete care archive. I showed her the advance directive and the notes from our conversations about hospitals. I did not ask her to agree that my choice was right. One evening, she found the photograph from Diane's intensive care stay on my desk. "Was this what you saw when the nurse offered the ambulance?" she asked. "Yes." Elise sat across from me. "Mom made you promise too much," she said. "I promised more than the document said. You always thought protecting us meant deciding what we could handle." I wanted to tell her that dispatchers are trained to make order from incomplete information. Instead, I said, yes. It was a smaller confession than the televised one and harder to make. On the first anniversary of Diane's death, Hawthorne Ridge invited families to a meeting about its revised fall program. Elise did not want to attend. I did, not because I believed a policy could redeem the night Diane died, but because someone had to make sure the correction lasted longer than the publicity. The training director showed a slide with the call transcript. Names were removed, but every word was ours. The transcript did not begin with Tanya's final sentence. It began with the discovery of the fall. It included Diane saying she was afraid. It included Tanya recommending an ambulance. It included my questions about symptoms. It included the 7-second pause. And it included the second when I said, "Don't call an ambulance." The next slide asked staff to identify what duties remained after that refusal. The answers filled the screen: assess, notify, monitor, document, escalate. No one in the room knew I was the husband on the call. I sat in the back and listened while nurses discussed the difference between respecting a patient's wishes and abandoning observation. They talked about staffing, handoffs, and the danger of writing "appears asleep" when a neurological assessment is required. For 31 years, I had told dispatchers that a recording is not kind or cruel. It simply keeps the parts people later wish had happened differently. I tried to make Diane's last call kinder to me. I cut away my fear, my promise, and my decision. What remained sounded simple enough for television: a careless nurse, a helpless family, a sentence that seemed to explain a death. The full call was harder. It showed a wife terrified of the hospital, a husband who confused love with certainty, a nurse who offered the right response and failed to carry out the next one, a daughter who pushed an unfinished story into public because anger felt faster than investigation, and a facility whose written safeguards meant nothing when no one followed them. That complexity did not weaken the truth. It was the truth. Elise keeps a copy of the state report. I keep the complete recording. Neither of us plays it often, but at Hawthorne Ridge, new employees hear the call during post-fall training. They hear every 2 minutes and 12 seconds. They hear Diane ask not to go back. They hear Tanya offer help. They hear me refuse it. Then they study the hours of silence that followed. The 43 seconds I deleted did not absolve the nursing home when they were recovered. They only made it possible to hold the right people responsible for the right things, including me.